The previous basket is under review.
Season previews continue on the Scout team, breaking down the best teams and storylines you'll need to know for the 2026-27 college hoop season. Today, we're breaking down a team that both of us spend a lot of time watching, and we have talked a lot about on this show over the last couple of years. That is Florida, a team that has helped usher in a new era in college basketball in a lot of ways with the way that they play, being super big, playing super fast. It led to incredible success 2 seasons ago, a national championship in year 300, Todd Golden. A really strong second act, I would say, all things considered, to get a 1 seed, to win the SEC, albeit a weaker SEC, but ends in heartbreak in the NCAA tournament against Iowa. Lots of takes there. That game remains sort of mind-boggling to me, having been there and like experienced the whole thing of it. But I think the one thing that always rings true is just at the end of the day, there's a lot of luck that comes with going on a deep NCAA tournament run. And you can criticize certain areas of their team. They were not perfect last year by any stretch of the imagination. But sometimes you also just have to like pay the piper of like giving back your they lived a charmed life in the 25 tournament. They lived a pretty uncharmed life in the 26 tournament. We'll see what happens in 27. But they're running it back. The front court's back. It should be an awesome team. Everyone's preseason number one. The preseason number one label has not been kind though. I am personally of the belief that Florida is a little bit different. I think a lot of the teams that have been preseason number one and flopped were teams that had clearly defined low ceilings, but had a lot of returning production. I think Florida obviously has a proven high ceiling. They were an elite team analytically last year. They were obviously a national championship team with many of these faces the year before. But it is a fascinating trend, and they will walk around with incredible expectations attached to them. And I'm fascinated to see how they handle it, because they obviously have talent, but this is not a infallible basketball team. It has clear holes and clear flaws that were exploited at times a year ago.
Yeah, Florida has shown everything that's great and maybe not so great, depending on how you look at it, about a single elimination tournament. Like you said, when they won their championship, it looked like they were dead in the water on a number of occasions. And they also just showed what's great about basketball, where you can maybe get outplayed for a lot of the game and then have a shot maker really make something happen, like we saw with Walter Clayton. And then the other piece, going back to last year, is everyone loves talking about how the NCAA tournament is all about like matchups. Like people love that idea of like, oh, well, like matchups are important, but like they never like really follow up on what that kind of functionally means. And then to see an Iowa team just go right at something that they saw with Florida's pick and roll defense, Florida, who said, okay, we actually love how we're guarding this pick and roll, and we don't think they're just going to be able to keep hitting tough shots in the paint. And then Iowa did. Like, we really just saw every piece of what basketball is and what college basketball is and what a single elimination tournament is with those 2 seasons. And I thought that was really interesting. It was, again, even if you are not a fan of any of the teams involved, I just thought that was just kind of cinematic and said everything about what college basketball and the NCAA tournament is. And I think too, what you were saying about how this is so different than other number one teams, like I couldn't agree more, because before NIL and there was everyone that with a pulse, anyone that could maybe get an Exhibit 10 is gone from college basketball. So it's like, oh, well, anyone who's good enough to win a championship or be a number one seed and going into next season, it's like, oh, well, they're going to lose guys because they were good enough to have some guys that would be on 2-ways or even Exhibit 10s, whatever the case may be. And then NIL and the immediate eligible transfer came in. It's like, oh, well, these teams will never be, similar. They'll never be the same because guys will leave, or even teams that are good will just bring in all this other talent with other, like we haven't seen a situation like Florida running it back like this from 2 1 seeds. So this is somewhat unique. And I think it's also unique in that I feel like kind of the consensus is, oh, you've got to have this team number one overall. But also I feel like everyone kind of agrees they're the style of number one team, that the floor is exceedingly high, but there are some ceiling questions. Now, you're returning a lot of guys from a team that won a championship 2 years ago. So it might seem kind of funny to say the ceiling questions, but then I think a lot of people look at the Iowa performance last year and say like, okay, well, there's your ceiling problem. So it becomes very interesting. And yeah, there's a reason we're talking about them today.
Yeah, look, I think Florida has a higher level of talent than a lot of the teams that we talk about as like true ceiling concerns. Like last year's Purdue team is a good example, right? Everybody should put them number one. that team like didn't clearly have an NBA player on their roster. They weren't especially big. They weren't especially athletic. Like they had clear holes, and their team had a kryptonite the previous year defensively. Florida doesn't really have that. They have the NBA talent with Hauk, with Condon, with potentially Chinyelu. They have, the track record of being a elite two-way team. They were top 10 offense last year, top 10 defense. But I think so they're like safely elite versus Purdue is like safely pretty good. I think it's possible someone will pass them. I don't know who you're making the bet on that being. Some people would say Duke, maybe Illinois, if like Merck has like an incredible, step forward. But like, it's hard to envision a world where Florida isn't really good. Now the record might not be as pretty because the SEC will be more difficult on paper than it was a year ago. And so I think you have to factor that in. But I also think like Florida went through a lot last year and should be a better team and in a better place because of some of the things they had to go through and learn and grow from. And we'll talk about that, particularly with their point guard, Boogie Fland, in a minute. But I think the story of Florida begins in the front court. Alex Condon, Ruben Chinyelu, Thomas Hauk running it back, all three huge parts of the title team, all three huge parts of the 1 seed team a year ago, all three coming back. Hauk was the big surprise. Chinyelu, maybe, the most valuable in terms of the rebounding, the defense. But I wanted to zoom in on Condon because I thought he made real strides last year, was really, really valuable to their team, in spite of the fact that his shooting sort of fell off the cliff, and in spite of the fact that Florida abandoned playing him at the 5. He was a elite. I mean, it's kind of weird to call him a small ball 5 because he's almost 7 feet tall, but like smaller ball by Florida standards 5 in the title run. And they just had so much size with Hand locked in and Chinyelu a year ago. They basically abandoned that outside of the last like 12 minutes of the Iowa game, and he nearly swung the game for him. We're going to see more of that lineup this year. And I'm fascinated to see if Condon has like another step in him that you wouldn't expect because of just shooting regression and then potentially, playing a little bit more comfortably as a 4 or 5 instead of just a 4.
Yeah, Florida kind of boxed themselves in by really having Hauk at the 3 to start, and their only other 3 really being Isaiah Brown. And then because of that, it wasn't as much as like, what does the front court look like? It was just like, well, if they kind of have to play big because there's not enough perimeter bodies and wing bodies. But when you look at what makes Condon really good, it's his ability to attack off the dribble, whether it be facing up, whether it be running in transition, whether it be picking and popping, not always to shoot. As you mentioned, the shooting kind of fell off a cliff. We have seen him shoot a pick and pop 2 years ago, but that pick and pop to attack where he can use that driving ability. So when you're talking about someone whose best ability is to drive, to run in transition, to catch on a trail, or to pick and pop and then drive, like that is everything that is going to be better at the 5. You need to have driving lanes for this to work. So if that person is at the 5 versus another 5 occupying, which you see in some of these clips where he's making stuff happen, but it's against more getting contested at the rim because there's another help defender planted there. Whether it be the matchup of we want him to drive, so what gives him better driving advantages? Well, it's going to be putting at the 5. Whether it's getting involved in pick and roll settings where he can be that kind of like quick slip, short roll and attack guy. Well, he's probably going to be better at the 5. So I just look at that and say, like, this has nothing to do with like Ruben Chinyelu, who is tremendous. This has nothing to do with like saying that like, oh, like they don't have other options at the 5. It is just like Alex Condon is a very, very good player who is much, much better at the 5. We also saw it as a passer. One of Florida's leading assist men, which you could probably say you maybe use as some slander towards maybe the point guards at the time, and people did that. But he's, again, a very good passer out of that trail post position. Probably better at the 5. We see so many teams running that kind of 5-out stuff. So it just continues to kind of mount that this might be the better setting is getting him at the 5 more. And I would also just one last piece would say, even on the defensive end, as a shot blocker, someone who rotates over, and his shot blocking numbers aren't great because he was always on the floor with another 5. But I do think that just kind of like skill set wise, if you put him on 5s where he can be that roamer in the paint, he's going to be a better shot blocker. So I will be interested to see exactly what Florida does. I thought it was very notable that they went to that small ball lineup against Iowa, which kind of just speaks to the level of desperation Florida was at, because they never went to that lineup at any other point during the season. So kind of shows that they were scrambling a little bit to go to it. But yeah, when their best lineup, at least I think, is going to be Houck at the 4 and Condon at the 5. And that's not saying anything bad about Chinyelu. Will they be able to do that? And I do think by bringing in like a Denzel Aberdeen, that gives them more versatility on the wing, they'll be able to play those smaller lineups.
Yeah, I mean, it was wild, and it did speak to like just such a strange game it was. I mean, Chinyelu, again, I think we have to be careful not to dismiss what Ruben was, because Ruben had an incredible year last year and also took so many steps forward where I don't think we can rule out that there's another jump coming from Ruben, especially offensively. Like, that guy was a zero skill weapon when he got to Florida, and has just really continued to emerge, as a guy you could throw to on the block occasionally, who can carve out space. The rebounding dominance. I mean, they were the best rebounding team, one of the best in the KenPom database last year. They still have to lean on that, so they can't go away from it entirely. But yes, like, they just truly did not have enough wings to ever go small. They only had the big. So now the fact that there are games where you say, hey man, like, we're going to get put into some weird binds because of how big we are. Now we can slide Condon to the 5. I love that. And they also have, if they still want to be pretty big, they can play Doman Petrovic, who's a 22-year-old who hasn't gotten a lot of attention, from Slovenia, but just has like nice size, can shoot the basketball, just like a more versatile front court piece than they've had. And so I think those are like the little tweaks that maybe help them in individual games, help them in matchups in the NCAA tournament. But yeah, I'm fascinated to see like how often we see all three of those guys on the floor, how often we see these three big lineups, or do we get more 3-guard, 2 big, more traditional style of play that we saw from Florida during the national title run, right? Like, when you think about that team, it was Clayton, it was Martin, and it was Will Richard. They had to have those guys on the floor as much as possible. And they have a little bit more flexibility to do that, assuming, of course, Denzel Aberdeen is on the floor, and there's some stuff to work through there, but I think certainly trending is towards Denzel being a part of this Gator team in 26-27. I think the narrative and the reality with the next guy we want to talk about in Boogie Fland are pretty far apart, in that Florida was a disappointing team to start last year, almost entirely because they played an incredibly difficult non-conference schedule and lost some close games. And because they were a disappointment, all the blame was put on Boogie Fland. And Boogie Fland did not play great in the non-conference, but he really started to pick some things up in the second half of the year. And I thought, again, sort of until the Iowa game when things all fell apart for Florida, there were some like, man, Boogie's been awesome. Like, the way he's guarding the ball, the way he's getting him out in transition, like, he had really reinvented himself as a player, again, despite having a year where he shot a horrible percentage from the field. Like, not a guy particularly from 3. Like, this is a guy that came in as like, this is a guy who can theoretically really shoot it. I mean, he was almost a non at points last year. It was a disaster in a lot of respects. And so he's a very polarizing guy. And I think Florida needs, most importantly, just like the lack of mistakes. Their offense is going to be elite as long as they put shots on the rim, because they're going to go get it on the offensive glass. And when Florida faltered last year is when they turned it over and when Boogie turned it over. But there was a lot of good. And this is the type of guy on paper that's like, yeah, he should probably be expected to make a jump as a second-year transfer. But I think there's still this like real skepticism about who Boogie Fland really is. And I'm curious for you, as someone who watches a lot of Florida, who does as good a job as anyone of insulating himself from like the narrative and just like living in the reality. I'm curious where you stand on Boogie Fland, the player, and Boogie Fland, the fit with this team.
Yeah, so I have been a Boogie Fland defender, largely because I think that his defense is insane. And when you look at like what really made Florida successful last year, like, one, it was the offensive rebounds that bailed out an offense that really wasn't good with the first shot. And it was their defense. And a massive part of the defense, I know Chinyelu got a mountain of the credit, and rightfully so in a lot of ways. But like, Boogie Fland, who was guarding the other team's player who had the ball 50% of the time and making their life hell. Like, I thought he played such a massive role. And for a team that didn't create turnovers very often, he created a ton of turnovers and just made things happen on that end. So I love the defense. Now, I wanted to bring this back to his time at Arkansas, where he was really known for being one of the worst finishers at the rim in the country. And when you watch some of these clips, like, yeah, pretty surprising because he was always athletic enough to get there. And just, again, the ability to finish was not there. That's an area he really, really improved and had a really solid year finishing at the rim. So that there's like already a really big jump, something that I had some concerns about last year and that he really remedied. Now, the other piece of it, like we talked about a little bit with Condon, the spacing, the ability to create space at the rim was not really there. And he had to make some plays in phone booths with shot blockers in his hip because that's how Florida wanted to play. And he was still able to finish at a really high level. Now, this is something if Florida can clean up their offense a little bit, he could become, an even more dangerous downhill player because he's got that amazing first step. At Arkansas, he couldn't finish, but that's something that he's already, gotten a lot better at the finishing. Now, can Florida make his job easier? Now, this is where he does need to get a lot better is he doesn't have great vision. He doesn't seem to see plays as quickly as he needs to as the point guard. And you can see sometimes there, like he had the read on that first play to Alex Condon. He made it a second late. This time he's got opportunity to throw the skip. He doesn't. And he just, dribbles himself into trouble, creates a bad shot. There's also the piece where he does not make the pick and roll game easier on himself because of the shooting struggles. And I think also, again, talking about those shooting struggles, I think one of the concerns is that his jump shot doesn't look terrible. So the fact that he's shooting like a percentage that belongs on a milk carton is pretty concerning. It would almost be more like if you're Florida, you'd almost be like, oh, I actually just wish he had a nasty hitch and then shot really badly because there's something really tangible that we could help out. But there is certainly a lot of room on the offensive end for his vision to improve. I also do think that Florida's, rough and tumble, like we just throw a ton of bodies in the paint and we throw it at the rim and see what happens, get the offensive rebound. Like that is not going to help a point guard. Florida's offense on a whole, which is again, something that's going to be the big story to me about the season is can they improve that first shot offense and not just rely on getting 50% of their misses. I do think that would be something that would help Fland. But I also do think there are situations where, his vision needs to be better. His three-point shooting, of course, needs to be better. He needs to be somewhat of a threat there. But I still love the defensive game, and I love his ability to get downhill. And I think that the way that Boogie Fland is kind of seen is just something that's so 2026 in the way that people look at basketball, whether it's college basketball, not even just basketball, whether it's just like sports. I mean, we're getting into fantasy football draft season and every quarterback is either underrated and elite or absolute trash. And I feel like that's how everyone looks at every player. And Boogie Fland's kind of in that category. It seems like people are like, oh, clearly this guy is actually amazing. He's actually underrated. This is a top 10 point guard. Like if you don't see it, you don't know ball. Or it's like this guy's trash. Do you not see his 3-point percentage? And I just think this is a really, really solid starting point guard. I don't know. I don't know if that puts me in the like I'm pro Fland category, whatever it is, but I guess that makes me pro Fland.
He's also just such a victim of the expectations that came with him of being a 5-star, of being one of the best players in the portal last year. Where like if you stripped all that away and you were like, Florida has like a 3-star guy. Like if Boogie Fland had Thomas Houck's recruiting pedigree and Boogie Fland was just like a bulldog defender who could really touch the paint, who just like wasn't a great shooter and occasionally had turnover issues, he'd be like a folk hero in Gainesville. Like everybody would be like, man, I love this guy. How awesome is this? Like we look at this guy we found. But instead, because he has truly been a victim of like, he needs to be the next Walter Clayton. He needs to be this guy. He's an NBA player. He's a one and done. He's a Calipari guard, right? Like all these things that he's carried with him, I think has been really difficult. And I do wonder if this offseason allows him to reset and coming in for the first time with like this feeling that like, this guy is a little underrated for the first time in his life. Maybe helps him a little bit because again, there were some bright moments, but look, you're 100% right that the half court offense is not good enough. It wasn't good enough last year. When they got bogged down in games, they really struggled and they got out of that 2 years ago by like unbelievable shot making off the dribble. And they didn't have that. I don't really think they have that still. I think Aberdeen will help them. We'll get into Aberdeen in a minute, but like, their offense is very much like it's going to be rough and tumble if you can force them into a grinder. It's just hard to force them into a grinder. They're incredible at dictating the terms of the game, turning it into an up and down affair, getting those transition opportunities. And then again, as long as they are not turning the basketball over, every Florida possession is a good possession. I understand some of the shots look dumb. They're all good shots. when you get 43% of your misses, they're all good shots, especially when those 43% of the misses are getting got by 3 future NBA players. Like I wish we could like make this more complicated than it is. That's the reality. Florida starting on third base offensively because they go get their misses. It's like the Houston problem, but with, you know, an analytically minded head coach instead of like an old school ball coach. It's the same exact thing. How do they get out of that hole though in the half court? I'm curious to see if it's Aberdeen, because I thought Aberdeen had some nice moments two years ago in the Florida system when they needed him, when he replaced Walter Clayton. When Clayton was injured, he was amazing. And then he takes this bigger usage role at Kentucky. It wasn't always smooth, but like overall, I left last year thinking Denzel Aberdeen is a better player than I thought the year before. Like I didn't realize how good Denzel would be. So with that being said, like the idea of bringing him back to this system that he understands, that he knows, pairing him with another ball handler so he doesn't have to be the guy, he doesn't get forced into this point guard thing because of the injuries that Kentucky dealt with a year ago with Jalen Lowe. You know, this was a risky endeavor by Florida to go get him because of the eligibility questions, but assuming he's out there, and it obviously seems like he will be at this point, a lot to like here, I think. I mean, again, not a perfect player, not Walter Clayton, not an All-American, but like a dang good piece to round out the starting five.
Yeah, it was interesting given that I feel like kind of the perception was this was the high floor pickup, someone that is the known commodity, but maybe not like, again, the sexiest player, not with the stock being the highest coming off how Kentucky played. And I think on the defensive end, it's really interesting because some people, like in a lot of ways, Denzel Aberdeen has a reputation as being this incredible defender. Then also there's a lot of analytics that hate him on the defensive side. I think he does show a lot of effort there, which is where probably a lot of the like, oh, look how good of a defender this is. He's long and look how hard he works, which there's an element to that. I do think he's still a little bit porous at times and will run into some screens and being tough there. But I mean, what he'll bring effort wise to the Florida defense will be great. You know, he's going to bring effort there, but like what Florida needs is this. They need him to catch and shoot. And that was something that was really interesting was at Florida 2 years ago, he hit 44% of his catch and shoot threes. Now that number actually went down to 29% at Kentucky, but he shot off the dribble a lot more at Kentucky and shot well off the dribble. But again, this was a player 44% on catch and shoot threes 2 years ago at Florida, and Florida could desperately use that. Now, I also see like these kind of clips where he's attacking off the catch and attacking downhill. I think that's where he'll be best at with Florida. Can he get back to the catch and shoot he had 2 years ago, but be a little bit more of that catch and attack guy he was at Kentucky? Now, here's the thing that he did not do well at Kentucky, and maybe it's something to do with Kentucky's, you know, a small part in Kentucky's underwhelming season, is he's just never been a great pick and roll player, never a great individual creator. Now, he's not bad, but his numbers are just like slightly below pedestrian. And I think he was just miscast when there was injuries at Kentucky as this ball dominant type guy. And I think that that's where coming to Florida, if he can be the guy who plays off of, if we're playing through Alex Condon in the trail post, we're playing off of Boogie Fland, more of a traditional point, whatever the case may be, I think that getting Denzel Aberdeen off the ball is going to be a lot better. Now, if he can bring the shooting Florida needs, he can still bring a little bit of that creation, but not be as relied upon as he was at Kentucky due to the injuries. I think that'll be best. But I do see this as, again, I'm probably not as high on Aberdeen as some, but I also do feel like, yeah, this is just a solid veteran player who can take some usage if you need. If he's using a ton of usage, your team's probably not going to be really, really good. But if he can be the pieces he has shown at, the catch and shoot guy he was at Florida 2 years ago, the attack off the catch guy he was last year at Kentucky, take away a little bit of the low efficiency, isolation, pick and roll stuff, it could be just what Florida needs. And if he can play a lot of minutes at the three and guard at those positions, which I think he can, that'll also just help Florida's overall lineup versatility, get Houck at the four a little bit more, get Condon at the five. And that could be Florida, where Florida's at their best. And I do think Florida's best five certainly has Denzel Aberdeen at the three, at least in my opinion. And that will look pretty good and just give Florida some different tools.
Yeah. Again, we talk about like guys who are a little too maligned. Like, I don't think anyone is going to convince you that Xavier Lee had a great year last year, but like Xavier Lee was also a lot better than like the national perception was of Xavier Lee. But the biggest reason that Xavier Lee was a problem for Florida was he could not translate his off the dribble shooting to shooting off the catch. And Florida needs just like catch and shoot guys to space it. And there were too many open ones that he did not make the defense pay. I think Denzel Aberdeen will do a much better job with that. Again, as you said, the line of flexibility, he's bigger, he's more physical than Xavier is. He can slide to the 3 much more effectively, which allows you to play Boogie and Urban Klavjar. Urban Klavjar is like one of the best 6 men in the country. He was amazing last year. If you look at both Klavjar and Isaiah Brown, both of them had pretty strong on-off splits in SEC play in top 100 games and top 50 games. As you kind of narrow them down, both were like lower usage guys. Klavjar just like straight 3-point shooting. Isaiah Brown mostly just like a slasher that could stand in the corner. Again, Florida needed that. Sometimes there were too many cooks in the kitchen. And so I just like the fact that with this group, without having to kind of remake their team, they've been able to just create more flexibility with how they want to play. They can play 3 guards plus Condon plus Chinyelu. They can play 3 bigs still. They can play 3 bigs and 2 small guards. They can play 3 bigs and, Aberdeen, who's, big. They can play really, really big and play Aberdeen on the ball for like brief stretches and play him with Isaiah Brown at the 2. Like if they wanted to be like massive, they could do that. It's not impossible. So, I didn't even mention Alex Lloyd, who it seems like there's been like really positive reviews of. So all of a sudden you go from a team where you look down the bench and you just didn't know who could get on the floor in the backcourt to now a situation where I really think they have a lot of depth in that room and a lot more flexibility, which I think will help them as they kind of try to solve problems throughout the season. I didn't even mention CJ Ingram, another like young freshman that had some moments, that has upside. Like you go from a team that was not very deep a year ago, that really was like begging anybody to come in the game and give them something, to now being able to take the load off, I think, a lot more effectively. I think that will help them, right? It's probably not sustainable for Tommy Hauck to play over 80% of their minutes like he did last year. Like he's an incredible effort guy. It's just probably not healthy for him to play 33, 34 minutes, right? Condon, let's like get him off his feet. Like let's have him fresh. And I think you'll get that sensation that you had playing against Florida 2 years ago, which is just like a never-ending kind of cycle of bodies that can beat you, and that bench lineup just being killer. I think Florida could look like that again this year because of the way that they've kind of tweaked and built out their depth. So I think that's as big a reason to be optimistic as any. I guess the question remains, like, do you think they can improve tangibly in the half court, or will that just be their kind of kryptonite? If you can force them into a game like that, if you can suck the life out of the basketball game, can you make it interesting against this team?
Well, that's what's so funny about a team that was a 1 seed, pretty much returning just their entire roster. So it's like, it's kind of like, okay, well, our last season's problems still the problems. Can you really say for sure, like, oh, these things that were issues last year, like, won't be issues when you're bringing everyone back? But I mean, some of the words too, and I thought it was interesting when they made an assistant coach hire last year of Dave Klatsky, who was at Colgate for a long time, when everyone was kind of talking about how Colgate had the best, some of the best mid-major offenses in the country. Then he went to NYU at Division III and had really good offenses there. And when he was hired at Florida, there was a lot of talk like, oh, it's going to be the offensive coordinator. And then it came out that he was actually going to be the defensive coordinator. I think there was some discussion that he was going to have a bit more offensive touch this year. And I think that just, again, given what we saw last year, I think that we kind of need some tangible change here if you're going to be a believer in Florida and improving the offense and just having some different kind of touch of coaching there, different impact. So that's one thing to look for. I think for anyone who watched Colgate in those years where they were, really fun, I think if you could say inserting some of that into what Florida has with their athletes, I think a lot of people would sign up for that. So I think that'll have to be the changes, though. I don't magically see all these guys kind of changing their offensive abilities as much as I think playing smaller will like help their offense. I think that they do need some changes in structure. Will Alex Condon and Boogie Fland shoot the 3 better? Like probably it would be shocking if they somehow shot it worse. So like that'll probably help there. But yeah, I do think they need some schematic changes, and perhaps the way things ended last year will be what kind of gives the motivation to do that.
Yeah. So this is actually like an interesting thing I'd like to like pin you down on. If you were the head coach, if you were Todd Golden or you were advising Todd Golden, would you stay leaning into the things that make them so incredibly high floor? Right? Like I would guess that their efficiency margins will drop slightly if they play smaller. if they are willing to, if they will take more threes, if they are more reliant on jump shooting. Are you willing to make that trade-off because you think long-term in the season it will make you more dangerous, more lethal? Or are you going to play this brute force style, lean into the rebounding? Again, try to get 43% of your misses and never let people defensive rebound and make it be a top 10 point, 2-point defense and a top 10 or 20 2-point offense. Just lean into where you're really good. Swap like for like with Aberdeen. Maybe like some minor tweaks with like, all right, we can use Condon in certain lineups of the 5. Like, you seem to think, at least the way you're speaking to me, that Florida, who was a top 5 Ken Pom team, or number 6, excuse me, and won the SEC by 3 games, you would go in and say, we had a fatal flaw that we need to try to address, and we need to change how we do things to alleviate that, versus just say, hey man, we were like elite efficient last year. We're going to run this back and hope we have better luck in the NCAA tournament against the team again, and don't draw a team that like randomly shot 70% on 2s.
Yeah, I mean, I feel strongly about this, to be honest. Like, I'm trying to win championships. And I know throughout last season, I think you were one of the people that reported on or got the quote from Todd Golden, how like stuff was about like, oh yeah, like we believe playing this style like gives us a high floor. Like, you're Florida. I don't really care. Like, is floor an issue? Like, if you spend over $20 million on a roster, is floor an issue? Are you building a roster to beat Prairie View A&M by 1,000, or are you trying to win championships? That's why I really vehemently disagree with the idea that you're going to go in with one of the best recruiting bases, most kind of sought after schools to get players like the NIL they have, and to be talking about floor, like that's kind of an outrageous notion to me. I think talking about floor is what you do if you're at Colorado or South Carolina. So I just think like if I am at Florida with the resources Florida has, like, yeah, I'm thinking about winning a championship, not thinking about our floor. How do we make sure we don't drop out of the top 5 of the SEC? I don't know. That just like, people can tell me if I'm wrong. I'm interested to see what kind of people's thoughts are. But if if I was the Florida AD, if I was a big time booster and someone at Florida is talking to me about like, we just got to make sure our floor is high this year, that just seems preposterous to me. I'm trying to win championships. That's me though.
So, I mean, I still think their floor is so ridiculously high the way that they play. It's like, it's hard to imagine them not being like a top 10 Ken Pom team. So do you just say, all right, the bird in the hand is top 10 in Ken Pom. We're going to take that. We're going to lean into what we do. And hopefully we hit our ceiling. We shoot it better this year. Right. Or do you, and look, I think that's the beautiful thing for Florida. And I think this is probably how I would go about it, is I would want to experiment in the non-conference a little bit, right? Like, I know I'm going to have a million opportunities this season between their non-league schedule. They open with Miami. They go to Players Era. We have a great non-conference slate, and then we also have an SEC that should be much better. Like, I think there's probably something to be said for like, let's really stress test some of these smaller lineups. Let's really stress test like, how good is Alex Lloyd? How good is CJ Ingram? These like former elite recruits that we like really, we've invested enough in that they wanted to come back, right? Like, we're paying them real money to be here. Let's really try it and see if we can be a lot better offensively and be a little more creative offensively. And if we come around to SEC play and we're 7-4 and it hasn't really worked, then we can double and triple down into like, we're the biggest, nastiest basketball team in America, right? Like, they always can fall back on that. But I'll be interested to see, like, lineups wise, when they open with Miami, when they play their exhibitions, like, how much rope are they going to give to, Isaiah Brown and Aberdeen and Ingram and Lloyd and small ball? Like how much of it do we see, and how much of it is like, well, we got 3 nasty dudes that can bludgeon you on the glass, and we're just going to put that thing on the rim and hope. It's a fascinating conversation. But again, I think if you're backing Florida in a preseason number 1, you can feel good about the fact that you're not going to look like an idiot, right? Like the worst version of this team is still probably like, their floor is like, yeah, we're like 27-8 again, and we lost in like the second round of the Sweet 16, but we were a 1 or a 2 seed. Like, it's hard to imagine this team like I can't even envision like what the wheels falling off would look like, other than mass injury, which we can obviously never control.
Yeah, well, and it's funny too, just about the, like what you're saying about the idea of just ensuring the top the top kind of 10 finish. I think if you're Florida, you're also like, well, Michigan won this way. And then, if Houston almost was within a possession of winning it 2 years ago, if not for Florida. And then I think you said something right off the top that if you play the Houston style, but you turn those off the dribble mid-range jump shots into threes, like Florida does, like that can be a winning style. So like Houston has come within a possession of showing like, yeah, you can play that high floor style and still be right there. So I'd be interested. And I find that, and then potentially you look at Michigan and you just say like, oh, they kind of won playing the similar style too. So I'm really excited to see, but I think like you said, there's enough interesting pieces off the bench that, and also I think Florida is going to have the opportunities to, I don't want to say like they don't want to pencil in some losses and say like, oh, let's lose some games just to see what we have. But I do think even last year kind of showed that they could take some losses and still be a 1 seed and get where they need to go, given the opportunities the SEC will bring. We think the SEC will be a little bit better. So I certainly would love to see some of those bench pieces so you can make a shot, so you can bring some offensive creativity. That's it. It kind of goes back to, it feels a little bit almost like pre-net non-conference stuff in a way. Now Florida definitely scheduled in a way that they're going to have an awesome resume, but going back to the roots of like, if when you're a number one team that can win a championship, like using those opportunities to be like, okay, how do we lay the foundation to win a championship in a couple of months? So that'll be awesome. I'm curious to see the lineup decisions, how much they do play Con at the 5, what bench pieces get the opportunities. And of course, style of play, what changes there'll be.
Last thing on Florida before we wrap it up. I think it is sneaky valuable that these guys have all gone through an off season of expectation before, right? Like I think one of the reasons it's really hard to be preseason number one and be the team that's anointed in the preseason is like a lot of times it's like you've never experienced that and you're trying to balance like the pressures of that, and walking around with the target on your back and all these things, right? Like Florida did that last year. They felt that. They felt the like, oh my God, the sky's falling. We lost to Arizona night 1. Like, oh my God, the sky's falling. We lost to Duke at Cameron, et cetera, right? And so I think the fact that all of these guys went through that, like this won't be new to them. They will not feel a different way opening the year against Miami and Tampa than they do than they would any other year. Like this is what they're used to at this point. The target's on their back. It's been on their back. They're not running from it. And I think that's a positive thing for this Gator group. How they handle it, who knows? That's why we watch the games. Can't wait for it. It's only so much we can do on paper, so much we can do on film. Sometimes you got to go play the basketball games. We can't wait for that. We're counting down to college hoops on Basketball Under Review. Please subscribe. Check out all the beautiful content that people are producing here. It's been a really fun summer. It's going to be even more fun fall. We can't wait for college hoops. Please subscribe. Check us out. We'll see you all next week.